vote. Glad to be here. Looking forward to the upcoming year because, hey, we had a great 2017. Growth, participation, everything. We've got two of our favorite guest presenters here today, Michael Blumenthal, an MVP, and Ralph Rivas from Magenic, who are going to be talking about Office 365 and about the rather tumultuous first year, but very interesting first year of the SharePoint framework. Let's dive in. Hopefully, we've got other things that we're going to cover as well. Today's agenda, understanding SharePoint's purpose. We'll always be talking about big picture stuff. I'll give a little warning. I'm going to get a little preachy today. I know I try not to be, but sometimes there's things that Microsoft has to fix, and I'll be talking about that today. We'll also be covering recent news and upcoming events. We have an Office 365 update from Michael Blumenthal. We've got a SharePoint framework update from Ralph Rivas. I'll dive then into a few very low level but very useful SharePoint designer tips and best practices. We're trying to stay well grounded in the middle of the bell curve of the technology that's currently out there, but we'll also jump into Microsoft Teams. Specifically, we'll start looking at a handful of the 40 apps that are available that you can embed into your team sites. And I'll be trying to cover about, I think, 10 of those this session. We'll dive into BYOP as time permits, to bring your own problems. And then we'll look ahead and have a short time for discussion for what we want to try to tackle in the next couple of months. We need feedback from you, our members. And I see we've got 11 people in attendance today, so that's fantastic. Big picture stuff to start off. Websites, as we know, can take on numerous metaphors, and it's important to understand the ones that SharePoint was trying to target when the product was created 18 years ago. Websites can be thought of as billboards. That's useful, but it's not really good for collaboration. You know, a pamphlet or a brochure. Here's my company, abc.com. There's another metaphor, a website as a book. We've all seen these. These are Wikipedia, things like this. It's useful, but again, not necessarily for collaboration. Websites as applications is a very powerful metaphor for SharePoint, even though it's not particularly aimed at collaboration. It's perceiving SharePoint to be an application delivery platform, and it does it extremely well. Part of the challenge SharePoint faces is that it's a set of technologies that initially lent itself towards collaboration, but also is wonderful as an application delivery platform. The next most important metaphor is a website as a folder, as a container of files. This is still useful because it's finally getting towards collaboration. But ultimately, the handful of guys in the room in Building 900 in Redmond, Washington, way back in 1999-2000, the first vision they ever had for collaboration was a website as a room, specifically as a war room. That's why you see the team site is STS#0. It's the first template. They were thinking about a room as the metaphor for SharePoint. What's the big most, and it ends up being the most useful. It ends up providing virtual workspaces akin to a conference room turned into a project room that actually transcends time and transcends geography. That was the big play that SharePoint could bring to the table back in 2000, 2001, when it was just barely getting started as a portal technology. The guys in Microsoft were visionary. They were looking ahead and saying, a room, if it was a room, you could have people anywhere on the planet at any time of the day go into that room and work and be productive, and they would be focused, very, very contrary to working inside like your email inbox or something like this. What's the punchline? If you're using SharePoint as rooms, you're actually optimizing your use of SharePoint across the organization, whether you're process-centric or whether you're project-centric. Thinking of your SharePoint websites as rooms in which you collaborate, containing lists and libraries, lists of tasks, etc. That is the #1 fastest way to derive a return on investment from SharePoint. Shortest amount of effort, swiftest amount of effort, least amount of effort, greatest return on investment. Conversely, if you're using SharePoint for any other purpose, you may in fact be missing out on the easiest low-hanging fruit in your entire organization. It's something to think about. Warning, I'm about to get a little preachy next. Speculation. We'll find out in just a few moments that SharePoint 2019's first preview is slated to come out in mid-2018. And what's in SharePoint 2019 has already begun, the speculation. They're saying more modern page layouts and site templates, enhanced support for hybrid environments, enhanced support for the SharePoint framework, which is going to be a very important factor in new versions of SharePoint. The modern look is going to become the default look, and the classic look gets pushed to the rear. Out of the box look and feel will get an overhaul. SharePoint 2019 will start to look more modern, more like Microsoft Teams, more like the communication sites. Forms are going to be edited with PowerApps. That came as a surprise. I'm not sure I'm ready to buy that particular speculation. We'll see. And Microsoft Flow is going to lean towards becoming the default workflow engine. Again, I see that as speculation. It remains to be seen if Microsoft Flow is ready to actually take the reins from SharePoint Designer or from Nintex. My final little message at the bottom, mark to Microsoft. Sometimes you don't, it's not about what new stuff you put in, guys. You got to fix what's broke. And what do I mean by that? Let's take a step back for a moment. There's some absolute facts we have to face. Organizations are collaborating out there. They've been doing it for 30 years, but they're using what they have. Those organizations are collaborating using email, UGG. They're also they're collaborating using file servers, also UGG. Organizations perceive SharePoint inaccurately. Lots of organizations just don't understand what it is. It was sold to them with a haze around it that makes it always hard to try to understand what it is. One big thing that Microsoft has gotten wrong about SharePoint for 17 years, well, maybe not 17 years, is this. Improving chatting will improve SharePoint, great, but it's not necessarily going to improve its adoption. In other words, a lack of social media functions is not the problem SharePoint is suffering from. What do I mean by that? Users are absolutely accurate about one thing. SharePoint, at the very least, must match the functionality found in file servers and in folders. What do I mean by that? Making containers, websites, anywhere by anybody. And Microsoft's pretty good at that. SharePoint's pretty good at that. Renaming those containers, those websites, those lists, those libraries at will with absolutely no negative consequences. We're close, but we're not completely there. Where it really falls down is this. Moving containers, websites, lists, libraries at will via something as simple as drag and drop. The big comparison between people coming from a world of file servers and folders for collaborating and trying to consider Microsoft SharePoint to be the next generation, like folders on steroids, like a container on steroids, is the first question they ask is, I can go and build my folder structure, and if I don't like it, I just drag and drop it, and I can completely reorganize it. Can you do that in SharePoint? And the answer is a sad, resounding no. You need a third-party tool to start moving stuff around. You need consulting firms to come in, and that is such a downer that Microsoft has to fix that in one of the next releases of SharePoint. Moving websites around, containers on steroids, these rooms, this metaphor, absolutely is a requirement for us to really start getting all of those people that just are not using SharePoint the way that it needs to be used as a collaborative environment. We have to be able to move containers, no negative consequences, no expensive third-party tools, no consultants required. It's got to be as easy as what they're doing with the folders and the shared folders in their email and with the folders and the file servers that are on their network. If we don't do that, then SharePoint is always going to be preserved as something less than folders, and they're going to stay where they are, and they're not going to derive all of the other benefits, no matter how much social media tech we throw at it, period. Enough, I'll continue on with that. How do I know this? Look at Facebook. It's the #1 social media tech on the planet. Another fact you could say is there are no organizations on the face of the earth that are Facebooking their way into managing projects or collaborating on any size, nor will they, period. It's just SharePoint is the best collaboration technology the planet has ever seen. Those of us that have been here for 18 years, we continue to look and see and try to find competitors, and there are none. But it does have this one Achilles heel about the difficulty in being able to reorganize, rename, and copy and move content around between websites, between site collections. That's got to get fixed. I'll recap of 2017. I'll just glance at this. We had a great year last year. We increased membership from about 140 members up to 289. We literally increased, on average, 23 attendees, people attending these sessions, when we started off with 2. And we covered a lot of different topics. from 2016's feature packs to PowerPoint, PowerApps and Power BI into Microsoft Teams. We spent a lot of time in the SharePoint framework. What a roller coaster ride that's actually been. And then we dove into Power BI and Power Apps again, some integration focused on Ignite in the fall, and then started talking about Microsoft Teams and focusing. Lots of cool stuff. 2018, I hope, is going to be the same way, but we're going to need feedback from you. Our 16 now attendees are showing up. We need feedback on getting some steerage. This is your session, so we need some steerage to help you with that. Diving into news and events, I'll be brief because Michael is going to get segued into the rest of this. On the news front, Microsoft announces a mid-2018 release of SharePoint 2019. Skype is going to be merging into Teams. The Windows 10 Fall Creators Update includes support for OneDrive files, this placeholders, which is really cool. There's a couple of other things that we also talked about at the December session, so I won't repeat them all. I noticed a really fun article from Matt Wade on Office 365, what he called his document circle of life, and I invite you guys to go take a look at that. Looking ahead at events, our first session is today for the Chicagoland SharePoint Users Group. We've got Office 365 adoption groups coming up in February. Michael will mention that. There's actually a Chicago a SharePoint Saturday in St. Louis this coming Saturday, and I'm hoping I get to speak even though it's going to be virtually. They're trying to work that out. I may be the very first virtual presenter that they've ever had. Should be interesting and fun. We've got a handful of stuff that happens later in the spring and even in the fall and getting in towards winter, and if Mike has something else to add, that will be fantastic. Let's segue now into Michael Blumenthal and Office 365 news and events. Mike, I'm going to hand over to you. And there you go.
You guys are still on mute. You're on mute.
I can see your Office 365 news, Mike, but we can't hear you yet. You're still on mute, both of you.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, got it. Okay. I still have it.
Michael, if you turn the microphone off on the laptop, you might have better audio depending on the other phone near you.
Yeah, we got it going right now, at least for now. So let's just do from here.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Blumenthal. I am an Office Server and Services MVP. Many of you may have heard me speak at previous meetings or elsewhere in the SharePoint community. I am going to share with you just some Office 365 news from the last month or so, as well as a look ahead to what we can expect in 2018. So there are some things we know about 2018 already. First, we know that Teams, Microsoft Teams, will get more Skype features. So Microsoft has stated their roadmap is to merge basically all of Skype into Teams and make Skype the product go away, although the brand name will probably persist. That's going to take all of 2018 and beyond. We're going to see a lot of those updates happen in 2018. So product specifically for Skype and Teams, we know that's going to happen this year. The bigger picture, we know there's a cadence of significant updates that are going to happen this year because that's the cadence that started last year or before and are moving forward. So we know that in the spring and in the fall, there is going to be Office and Windows updates. So if your users are on the deferred channel for Office updates, they get updates every 6 months, and that's spring and fall. And so they'll get Office updates, and then there'll be Windows updates for Windows 10 on the same cadence. If you have users who are on the monthly or current channel for Office, they will continue to get updates on a monthly basis. We also know that in terms of understanding what the roadmap is for Office 2016 or Office 365, Microsoft likes to make big announcements about the roadmap, reveal the roadmap for the next 6 to 12 months at 2 different points in the year. So if you look back to 2017, it was May when they had a Future of SharePoint event, and in the fall at Ignite. So we can expect the same things this year. We have the SharePoint North America conference in May, at which we can expect many announcements about what Microsoft is going to do with Office 365, SharePoint, and everything else inside it for the next 6 to 12 to 18 months. And then more or less 6 months later, in September, we'll have at Microsoft Ignite, we'd expect to hear them to report back on the things they've accomplished since May, and the things that and any new things that they've decided they're going to do for the next 6 months going forward. So that's the overall annual cadence we can expect in 2018. Of course, this being Office 365 software as a service, we also will get these things, all these changes delivered weekly and summarized monthly as well. So it's 52 opportunities for Office 365 to get better throughout the year. There's also a number of conferences that we we know are happening in 2018 that are of interest to people who work with Office 365 and the digital workplace. And that's what I mean by DW here, not data warehouse, but digital workplace.
Hey, Michael?
Yes?
Where did you say the SharePoint North America conference is going to be located in May?
Las Vegas.
Always Vegas.
Vegas, baby.
Vegas in May. That sounds fantastic.
Don't get me started.
It's inside. So
Proceed, Michael.
yeah, okay. So the conferences we know of for digital workplace and Office 365. The Advanced Learning Institute starts off the year with a conference in April called Intranets for Employee Communication. Our local SharePoint Saturday, Chicago suburbs, is May 5th. SharePoint North America is May 21 to 23, probably with a pre-day conference, pre-day of content as well. There's the Digital Workplace Conference, or Digital Worker Experience Conference in June here in Chicago. Microsoft Ignite will be in September again, and that's in Orlando again. There'll be a SharePoint Saturday, Chicago in the city in the fall again. I'm very happy that we've gone from one event a year to 2 events a year. We used to have 2, but then the city one went away for a while and it's come back, so I'm very pleased about that. And SharePoint Festival can return to McCormick Place in December. So those are the conferences that we can expect. And certainly if anyone knows of others, I've got a list you can submit these things to, or just let us know either later in this meeting or email or so forth, or in the chat.
Hey, Michael, is that the Chicago Burbs, is that going to be at Chamberlain University in Bartlett again?
It's the one in Addison, yes.
Okay, great.
The both of them are through which university is that? I mean, DeVry. And one is the Chamberlain School of Nursing is part of DeVry, but it's 2 different DeVry campuses. So DeVry's been a good partner for them, and that's worked out quite well. Yeah.
For those of you that are attendees that have not been to a SharePoint Saturday at these DeVry facilities, they are fantastic. Super comfortable, the presenting, the seating, everything is fantastic about that particular venue. I know from experience. So please consider it.
Additionally, here I'll promote my user group, the Office 365 Adoption User Group that I co-run with Larry Kuhn, Joe Baksha, and Rich Skloot. 2 of them are from Microsoft, one's from Blue Cross Blue Shield. This user group focuses less on the technical aspects and more on user adoption. And our next meeting, our first meeting of the year, is February 1st at Microsoft Downers Grove. The short link to our meetup site is what you see on screen there, and it is case sensitive, and I can put that in the chat afterwards. And our featured presentation for that meeting is a discussion panel of Microsoft customer success managers, people whose responsibility is to help Microsoft customers be successful with Office 365 and Microsoft 365. So please join us for that. As well as, if you can't actually get there in person, you can call in to the Skype for Business call that we run during it as well. Moving along, a couple of our other Office-related announcements. There's a new app that Microsoft released for collaboration, Microsoft Whiteboard Preview, and it's a digital canvas for collaborating visually with teammates, whether in person or remote. So that's something to check out. I will be looking at that as time permits. If anyone else plays with it, feel free to report back.
Michael, is that available through Office 365? Is it a tile on the launcher?
It's not a tile on the launcher yet. It's actually available through the Microsoft Store. So you should be able to just get it from the store and run it on your laptop. But no, it's not. It doesn't show up as part of the integrated Office web experience yet. It's a desktop app.
Okay.
Is that also iOS and Android?
I don't know.
Okay, we'll check.
Yeah.
Mike, about 5 more minutes.
Sure. And I only have another slide or two. OneDrive got an interesting update. So prior to this update, when you wanted to share a file externally with the user and you wanted them to authenticate in some way, they had to have either an Office 365 account or a Microsoft Consumer account. Now there's a third option, which is as long as they have an email, they can use a one-time code to authenticate and get access to the file you want to share with them. So that's a nice one, especially for anyone who works with people or organizations who don't have Office 365, don't have or want to use a Microsoft Consumer account.
I'm going to give an applause there. That's for anyone who wants to work with people. And just end it right there.
Yeah. Boom. So all you need is an email address. You no longer need an email address tied to a Microsoft account of any flavor. And then Yammer got some reports built into the end user interface, so you can see the activity in your group. This is, for example, the statistics for all company in a network that doesn't use Yammer very much.
One person.
Yep, that's probably me.
Hey, Mike, I got a question about that preview. To that really quick.
Say that again.
Can you go back one slide to that expiring code? So this is an alternative to us going to customers and then sending them an invite to be an external user in Office 365 and them requiring a free Microsoft account. They can instead get this expiring code that we can provide them.
Yes, so the system will provide them the code. So when you share it, it'll send them the email and with the code, so they have that way you're confirming that that person is definitely using the email address you sent it to. So it's unlike an anonymous link where you can share that link wherever you want. In order to access the file you want to share, the person has to have access to the email that you sent the invitation to. Okay.
That's super cool. For organizations that use Office 365, who often find themselves regularly inviting external users, this is a very welcome alternative to authentication and granting them access. Cool. All right, continue. Sorry.
And notice that the codes expire. So just like it is with other kinds of multi-factor codes, they're only good for a short period of time. So that way you can't pass the code around. And so that's all. The only updates I wanted to share this time. I will have more next month.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. Normally, we would segue back to me. I would show you a slide about the next presenter, and then we would segue back to him. But today, everybody, we actually have a very hard stop at 1 o'clock. So I'm simply going to verbally segue over to Ralph Rivas, who's going to talk about where SPFx has come from and what's on the horizon for 2018. Ralph, over to you.
Let me try to share my screen over here. So I should say share my screen. Where is it over here real quick?
I'm making you a presentation right now.
Show my screen. Here we go. Let
We
me know
can
when you
see
see it. All right. Let me go into my mode.
Looks
Everyone's
great.
got my presentation now? The state of SPFx. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to barrel through this over here. We'll have time for questions at the end. In fact, I would like to encourage questions at the end. We made it so that instead of me just talking the entire time, I'm gonna go barrel through this, and then we'll see if there's any questions. If not, we'll proceed. All right. So this is the what's going on with SharePoint Framework. Okay. If you were here before and listening about SharePoint Framework, when we last left our heroes, yes, the SPFx, they had a large wait list last summer. There was all these kind of things that they wanted to do. The extensions happened to be in a release candidate mode. In fact, I think we gave a slight demo of that. Office 365 CDN was just releasing. Now, at that time, it was, for us, I felt that was huge and major. And it is very, very major, but we'll probably discuss that in more detail at a different time. There was a slew of heavy blogs that were published to basically fill the gap issues, such as deployment, how to do deployment, third-party API access, favorite thing to do, and of course a whole bunch of other little itty-bitty issues that essentially you could do with on-prem SharePoint that they were trying to figure out how to do with regulars. And there's still things that you can't necessarily do in one or the other. The SIG meetings, that's the special interest groups. This is a very important thing, and we'll talk about that more at the end of my presentation. They were getting together, and they would have just tease us completely. They're coming soon. This is all this stuff. Well, we can't commit. We can't commit. Other than saying like, hey, in Ignite, we'll announce something. I said, okay, great. Okay, so all of a sudden things happened. Boom, ouch, we got hit. Yes, Ignite came and went. But while we were looking at it going by, out came a real punch. Something hit us not at Ignite, but actually afterwards. And that is Framework version 1.4. 1.3.2 was actually what came out at Ignite. And that had certain things, but there was something that was missing, something that was going to knock our socks off. And it basically involves deployment. All right, here is the big, significant, and I can't underemphasize this or overemphasize it. There's a checkbox or a solution setting that allows automatic tenant-wide deployment. Imagine this. I made a web part. Automatically, when I drag and drop it into my app catalog, it's automatically deployed to all the websites. Oh my gosh, yes, auto-deploys it. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you have your Office 365 CDN turned on, it puts it there. It doesn't ask you, just goes up. Otherwise, and guess what? They actually deploy your assets and the bits to your app catalog site, huh? You might be asking, wait a minute, that's the app catalog. Why are you putting stuff there? Well, because guess what? It's a site. It's another SharePoint site, which means it is a container for things. So maybe you're asking, what happens to Azure? That was where people were putting things initially. For the first 6 months of the year, or actually all through the development period, if you had assets, you had to put it in someplace else, or drop it in SharePoint and sort of sneakily share it, right? So Azure was a big deal, all right? Well, guess what? You can still do it, but the reasons to do so are absolutely greatly reduced because anyway, you have all these automatic ways of doing it. What is the catch? Okay, of course there's a catch, right? Well, the catch is it's not quite the auto deploy. You still need to drag and drop the item into the app catalog. Yes, there is not exactly a PowerShell or any way to actually deploy it. Well, I'll take that back. There is a slight way, but it's, again, not the official way. They're waiting for that final portion to just happen. And then you're going to say, well, Ralph, 6 months since that, and really, is that the most important thing? What about this and that? Whoa. So what makes this such a big deal? Actually, this is the biggest deal because it basically just about completes the deployment picture. That's the hardest part. You can have a solution. You can do whatever you want, but if you can't deploy it or if you have trouble deploying it, maintaining it and all that stuff, what's the point? It's not there, all right? So now at least there's a place for everything to go by for default, which they didn't have before. They had that on-prem. They didn't have it before. All right, so the uncertainty of what it's going to cost your solution is pretty much settled. You now have your 3 absolute possible ways you're going to do it, either in a 365 place, either in the app catalog, or in some other container somewhere else. and you're absolutely sure at the very least what it's going to cost you. Azure, if you're going to put it in Azure, for example, you got to pay for the fact that you're paying for storage there. If you're going to put it in 365, well, guess what? You're already paying for that. It's part of it. You're not paying anything extra. But it's still in 365, and it's still only available in that context. All right, so what else? This adds a new security dimension to the third-party bits. Certainly. So you've heard of say yes to distress? Yes, say yes to distress. We're relying on the tenant SP administrator with the power to choose all or some. Essentially, it's yet another thing that they have to think about. All right, governance, it's always important. And I'm going to say if you're not doing governance, Mr. Michael, you're doing governance, right? Thank you very much. That's what I want to hear. You're all doing governance, the big G. But if you're not, and even if you are, it goes up the to-do list of things to address with the new policy. Doing it all means updates can break stuff immediately. Yes, no waiting. Come on down. You get a bad link. You get a bad link. Well, whatever. Basically, that was a problem before when you update stuff. But now it can be done much, much faster. So it's the kind of stuff where, like, unlike SPFx is not going to bring down your site or send you an errant nuclear attack that may not happen and destroy your Hawaiian vacation. It may not happen that way, but, all right, it's still going to be fast enough that you're going to want to pay attention to what's going on. All right, if you created your own training under the deployment process, like some people like I know, probably you have to change it, or maybe not. Maybe not. Okay, so here's the thing. The old ways still work. You can still do it that way, but you got to weigh the consequences of whatever it is you've done before. And this is so funny because it's only been 6 months or less for some folks doing stuff. It's like, oh my gosh, there's already an old way. Yep, you got to think about this stuff, especially if you're spending a lot of money to do it. With the new bits comes new powers and new responsibilities. This is, if you haven't figured that out by now, with SharePoint Online, it's basically your day-to-day or week-to-week. As Michael was saying, every week you have an opportunity for stuff. And basically, it's week-to-week, even if you are in the battleship. That's the week that you're going to be doing. All right, let's see. And now, even if when they do break something, so like say the issue with the Node, there was an issue, for example, with Node, with a Framework 1.4 came out. You can look it up if you wish. We can talk about it separately on the side. In fact, the latest version of Node didn't work. You actually had to do something funky. But we were able to troubleshoot it using the same kind of techniques that we do to troubleshoot Angular, React, Vue, or whatever. And that is an amazing thing to itself. All right, and remember, there's always user voice. You guys know about user voice for just about anything you want. You can make yourself heard. But here's a very important thing about the SharePoint framework. Better yet, you can contribute straight to the GitHub site and just simply bend SharePoint to your will. Because you can. Why not? You can either fork it and do it yourself, or you can say, hey, let's start something up there. Maybe Microsoft will pick it up, and they have done it before. That is the way to make it done. So we're all done over here. I just want to give a shameless plug to my podcast at cloudtalkshow.com. And of course, let's check out these links for you to see. This is a very key one, the dev.office.com/blog/PNP-January-2018 update. And let's see what other links we have. So, wait a minute. That is the last link. That's it. That's all the links you need because, I mean, here, check it out. Let's go there. Let's go skip verification of this link. And this has everything. I didn't realize it when they did this update. And I'm just going through the list over here. Everything's in here. Where the blog posts are, where the updates are, where the GitHub stuff are, where's the documentation, where's the training, everything, the CLI, provisioning, the PowerApps.
You make it sound like this is a genuine portal for all things SharePoint framework.
Oh, this is not just a framework. This is everything going on with everything that's open source for what they're doing. And it even shows who are the contributors, who's actually helping. And more importantly, who from Microsoft is actually available, who's actually doing the work. They're giving you the actual names of the Microsoft folks. And can you imagine that, like a Microsoft product saying, hey, here's our developer. You can just click and bug him directly. What? They never did that before.
Here's his cell phone number, and here's where he lives.
Well, it's bad enough. They gave you his Twitter link. That's bad enough. Right. So, I mean, look at that. Sharing is caring. Yes, sharing is caring. And this is what the whole point. The whole point is if you're doing the SPFx stuff, if you're a web developer doing this, you can be a consumer, sure. But right now, it's early enough that you could be a mover and shaker. It's not that hard. Attend the SIGs. The SIG meetings are linked over here. So if you want to join the bi-weekly conferences and actually talk to the actual people and top people that you've heard about only online, or once in a while in Twitter, they might give you some, some love or something. You want to really meet them, you go to the SIGs,
And I want to add in here that GitHub is not only the place where they put all their code, but it's also where they're starting to put all their documentation.
Yes.
You can find, as you go to docs.microsoft.com and look for, say, documentation on all the PowerShell commandlets for SharePoint Online, if you find a bug in those commandlets, you can go over to GitHub. There's a repository with all that documentation on GitHub and create a GitHub issue for the problem and documentation.
Check it out. So let's take a look at one of those docs, for example. Boom, there is the actual documentation. It's in GitHub. They misspelled video. I can fix it.
I see this into another 10-minute session for next month, just getting people acclimated to participating in this GitHub, which is, as I understand it, this is the replacement for CodePlex that Microsoft had, right?
Oh, it's more than that. It's way more than that.
CodePlex is dead. It's retired. It's still read-only available if you need to get to it. But Microsoft has adopted GitHub, along with the rest of the world, of course, as their open source repository.
It's also, here's the most important thing. We said this from the beginning. This is Microsoft's dog food. The Microsoft developers are going to make something new for SharePoint. They're going to do it here. This is where they work, right? You want to contribute and work with them, you can work with them here. They create something new to help them. You immediately see it, and you immediately say, hey, Microsoft, you missed the ball on something. I can fix it. Boom. You're right there. This is different than anything they've ever done before ever. They've actually, because they're using GitHub, they said, hey, GitHub is not working very well for us. So they actually contributed to GitHub itself to make it better. So some of GitHub's
all my whining about being able to drag and drop and move sites around represents a fix to an existing code base. This would be the place I would start as far as trying to appeal to Microsoft.
Appealing is still user voice. Actually doing something about it is GitHub.
Yeah.
Understood.
So, with all their docs.microsoft.com documentation, as I said, that lives in GitHub too. So if you find something wrong, you can not only post an issue, but if you know how to fix it, you can go ahead and actually fix it.
Yeah.
And fork the code, fix it, and push it and make a
do a pull request and then push it back in, and then they'll approve it and they'll put it through QA. They have QA. Hey, Microsoft's got the resources. Why do it yourself? I mean, this is beyond powerful. The whole idea. That's why I'm saying that one thing is so important. The fact that you can move things around is just simply sitting on top of all of this that has now been growing for the last 3 years. The rest of Microsoft is looking at this team as their model to go forward with all their development work for everything else. Everyone else is going like, huh? What? Microsoft can do that? Well, guess what? Yes, they can. They're doing it. The whole CLI thing that we saw on the link over here, their CLI is going to work for the Mac. It's going to work for Linux and all that stuff. Even PowerShell, they ported it. Guess what? Just last week, they ported it over to Mac and Linux. This is why I asked Michael, it's like, is that whiteboard also in Android and iOS? You know what? Probably.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I don't know how many platforms they released it for, but clearly their strategy going forward for anything at least Office related is that they're making it for all platforms.
Yes.
Ralph, you're fast convincing me that adding a glance on a monthly basis to GitHub as part of the agenda for this session might be time very well spent. What do you think?
Well, it's a hard one because here's the thing. The GitHub is when you want to do something. If you are, let's just say this is the bleeding edge here. The bleeding edge happens here. You're the bleeding edge. You're wanting to do development and everything else. That's what it is. That's one thing. Where Michael's pointing is probably more where most people are at. Those kind of updates. The big picture. Here are the systems that are coming at your way. Here's what we're throwing at you. Here's what's going to change. You need to be able to absorb that first. If you can absorb that and you still have time in your hands and want to get your time to do stuff, then you come here. It's almost like there's layer 1 and there's layer 2. This is layer 2. And that's why we're here. This is what we can talk about. So both Michael and I can actually talk about this kind of stuff, even if you decide to go layer 2 or even layer 3, which is you're actually working with the code.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah. Did I hit 10 minutes or did I pass it? Because I sort of demoed. It was not going to be a demo. This is the demo. Here's your site. Enjoy.
You passed it, but it was all good stuff. It's in the nature of this users group, and we can work with the time that's remaining. I'm also noticing that we actually have quite a number of brand new people. Aaron, Anthony, Blake, welcome. Brian, Craig, we've seen you before. Welcome again. Fahad, you look new. Jolien, you've been here before. Welcome. Matthew Kuhn, in and out, and Teresa Nices is a new name to me. Welcome to you guys. I hope you're enjoying so far. Ralph, thanks for this particular one. You're going to, let's see, I guess I'll change presenting, take back over, and we're going to dive into not the cutting edge stuff, but we're going to dive back momentarily into the stuff that many organizations still have to work with on a regular basis, which is stuff that's inside SharePoint. 2010, yes, 2010 still out there. 2013, absolutely. 2016, and with it, it means we're still working with InfoPath, we're working with SharePoint Designer. So one of the things that we're going to include in today's session is talking about just some very simple tips and tricks that we'll try to share every single month about SharePoint Designer, about InfoPath. In this particular one, it's SharePoint Designer. One quick tip is this: SharePoint Designer workflows are at their core event handlers. That's what workflows really are. And there are only two types of events. Namely, there's an item changed event and an item created event. So if you take time to name your workflows to acknowledge this, you'll achieve a new level of consistency across all of your workflows, in all of your lists and libraries, in all of your websites, in all of your site collections. And that only makes all of your workflows that much easier to inherit between two people, from a consultant to a person in the company and then back again. What do I mean by that? A naming convention that's worked very well for us and for our customers in the past is to simply name our workflows, whether or not they're LWFs, they're list workflows. We start off by naming the name of the list that it's attached to. The vast majority of our workflows are ones that are attached. They're list workflows, so they're specific to a list. You name the list, and it's either going to be the item created processor workflow or the item changed processor. What actually happens inside there is the nature of the business logic, the workflow, the business process that's being automated, but ultimately it's triggering on either item created or item changed. So why not name it that and not forget what it is that's actually being triggered here? An example inside this little laboratory is just a list called mock processes, and it has an item change processor. It's a list workflow, and it has an item created processor with and it's a list workflow. So that if you're coming into it for the very first time and you have no idea what this workflow is supposed to do, you already know just by inspecting the name what it's triggering off of and what it's attached to, what it's listening to, and what kind of a workflow it is. And that can actually have some very useful benefits. Does this work for every single workflow you'll ever create? I can't say yes to that. But for the vast majority of your cases, this can actually turn out to be a remarkably handy best practice. Another tip is to try to leverage the sections or the stage titles. They automatically show up in the workflow status field in your SharePoint list. Try to leverage this to your advantage. How do you do this? You simply name your stage titles or your section titles as if you're reporting the status of the workflow step. So don't give them something that's not useful. Instead, use examples like, I'm launching the workflow, I'm ramping up the workflow, I'm creating workflow variables, I'm processing a new item, I'm processing a changed item, I'm sending emails out that ultimately are being formulated and calculated, because lots of workflows all do that. I'm ramping down the workflow, and ultimately I'm completed, ending literally with a period instead of an ellipsis. And what you'll find is that you can glance even inside your lists, if this is what it looks like inside SharePoint Designer, that I'm naming all of my steps, all of my stages, according to what I'm trying to accomplish in that section. You end up with a consistent pattern in your workflows that can be replicated again and again and again across all your workflows, so that when your colleagues or someone new comes in to inherit that workflow, it's not a completely new idea. There's always going to be a launched section, a ramping up section, a creating variables section. There's going to be a processing section. There's going to be a sending email section. There's going to be a ramping down. There's going to be a completed. And everybody knows to start looking for that. Do all workflows have all of those segments? No, but you can just leave them blank as long as they're there. You start having a common template that your workflows are going to try to adhere to. And because of that, it becomes much easier for somebody new to come in and inherit and extend or remedy or resolve some kind of an issue. And in the list themselves, where you see a particular workflow column showing up, you can actually see very quickly what the status is of a particular workflow. This item created event has a completed workflow. This item changed event is still processing. And just a few seconds later, the first one still shows completed, and now the second one shows completed. So you end up getting very useful messages about how your workflow is doing delivered right into your list. Your list starts to act almost like a dashboard on the inner workings of that particular workflow, and that can come in really handy. It's a simple change to make in both these cases. They can have very significant consequences, very significant impacts on how useful the tool is for you going forward, especially when we're told by Microsoft even 2 months ago, we shouldn't be telling our customers don't use SharePoint Designer for workflows anymore. We shouldn't be telling our customers don't be using InfoPath. It still looks like it's going to be bread and butter all the way through 2018 and maybe even beyond, contrary to what the speculations were about PowerApps as a form and about Microsoft Flow as a replacement for the primary workflow engine for SharePoint Designer workflows. So it's just a couple of things to think about. Now that we talked a little bit about old stuff, and I see we've got about 14 minutes left, we're going to dive back into new stuff, because in this users group, for those of you that are new, we're always trying to address new stuff and keep your hand on the pulse of where Microsoft is headed. But we also want to try to address common needs that we in the trenches have to face on a regular basis. We talked about the trenches. Now we're going to go back into looking a little bit more at this exciting new technology, Microsoft Teams, which we know is really secretly SharePoint under the hood along with Skype. Very cool. We saw in December, we had a description of what Microsoft Teams is. It's a platform for combining workplace chat. It's a chat-empowered collaboration environment. You've got meeting notes and attachments. Organizations can spawn teams. The teams spawn channels. The channels actually spawn streams. In other words, conversations that are very chat-centric around collaboration. But under the hood, each team is actually a SharePoint site. And that's what makes it interesting to this users group. The strengths of this tool, Microsoft Teams, were that it was mobile ready. The individuals can regularly participate in multiple teams. That's very intuitive, very natural. Each team automatically gets its own SharePoint team site. Hey, we love that. Now you can go back and forth between the team UI and the team site that's underneath it, whichever user interface, user experience works best for you. Love it again. It integrates chat-centric collaboration nicely. Microsoft Planner is what helps it get embedded into channels, and it's an app that actually puts in tasking and the tracking of tasks, which is the third and the fourth step of collaboration maturity, into our overall toolkit. So we're not just communicating, which is the lowest level, the lowest step of collaborating maturity. We're not just sharing, but we're actually tasking. We're dealing in the currency of tasks now, of things that need to be done, and we're tracking them all. That's a very exciting feature of Teams. And there's actually lots of new apps. In fact, there are about 40 new apps that can be added into a team or a team site. And we're going to spend the remainder of today looking at as many of those as we can. I think we can get through them all. A demo that we gave back in December was a mocked up Microsoft Teams for a school facility, where we had all of the different groups, the different departments, different faculties, including the students, and the channels were all the various events or the courses that they were taking. We had an interface that we could see inside a laptop that actually was very compelling and responsive. It looked cool, but also it had a wonderful mobile experience as well. One of the things we noticed, oh, actually I have a challenge question I wanted to ask. What can people actually use the wiki functionality for? I heard from somebody from AT&T saying they're actually using the wiki. Start writing while I'm talking in the chat tool here of our GoToWebinar. Tell me if you guys are using wikis and what you're actually using them for. I want to see some output come from that. That's all I'm going to spend on that particular slide. The game plan for the next couple of minutes, even the next couple of sessions, is to look at all 40 of the apps that you can embed into a Microsoft Team site or the underlying SharePoint team site that's a part of it, and see if we can at least understand what they are, why they exist, and what we could possibly do with it. And then I'll be inviting you as members of this SharePoint users group to come back with ideas, things that you are working inside your organization where you're starting to leverage some of this new functionality in Microsoft Teams. It ought to be pretty exciting. The first thing we're going to look at, the first 10, is actually all Microsoft Office related stuff. We've got Excel, PowerPoint, Planner, Word, and OneNote are the first ones that I'll look at. Ultimately, you're not really adding Excel into your team or into your SharePoint team site. What you're really doing is adding a particular Excel file. What do I mean by that? It means that what you're doing is actually embedding in your web page or in your team site experience an immediately editable file, like an Excel spreadsheet. And if we look at the next slide, we see that this applies to all of the other Word products. You can have a PowerPoint slide embedded right in the page, a Microsoft Word document embedded and editable right inside the page. So you're surfacing this content without making people have to click to get it. You're surfacing the slides, you're surfacing the pages, you're surfacing the spreadsheets in an editable format. And that can have some potentially very powerful uses. In particular, when you're talking about an inventory list, or you're talking about maybe a project work plan that people are updating in real time through this surfaced file exposed inside either the Teams UI or in the team site that's underneath. Either one is actually useful. The one that I find the most powerful is the planner, that you're actually putting tasks in there that people can click on and immediately respond to and update, so that as a project manager, all my people come into that team, they go work whenever they can, wherever they are on the tasks that I've assigned to them. They update them right on the fly using nothing but a laptop, a desktop, or even while they're sitting there eating lunch or they're on a train or something like this with their mobile phone. What a powerful experience for asking people to continually trickle information in and for me to feed information out as a project manager. I absolutely adore where Planner is actually going with this. The next one we'll look at as far as a new app is something called Trello. I'd never heard of it before. I did a little background looking. What I did find out is it's kind of like next generation Microsoft Planner. It's Planner on steroids. They're trying to take that idea of collaboration via tasking and via tracking to the next level. Everybody's starting to fall into place about this 4-step maturity model. It's all about communicating and then sharing, quite all right, but they're getting into the tasking and they're getting into the tracking, and they're saying this makes sense and this is the tool that can start making it both useful and easy. And if it's easy, we'll do it, and if we do it, we end up being productive. So Trello looks like it's another thing. You're going to subscribe to it, but there's some additional features that you get out of it, and it looks like there's some things to like about it. Let's watch and see what happens between Microsoft Planner and what appears to be a very direct competitor, this product called Trello. The next one, a very friendly YouTube, and we can all imagine what this looks like. I'm going to be embedding a video right smack in the middle of my project site. And here I've thrown up one about archery secrets, just to give you the idea of what it all looks like. That in the middle of a particular group of people in team, in the middle of a particular channel, I can actually embed a YouTube video, and all I had to do was supply a URL. And people can literally play the video right inside the rest of the content. So you're surfacing content from outside of Microsoft into Microsoft Teams to create this homogeneous user experience that's a combination of content stored in Microsoft, but also outside of Microsoft. You can go and edit it where it lies, weave it all together, and form very compelling user experiences inside Microsoft Teams. I'm looking forward to seeing how people will use this, in particular for maybe doing training at the end of a deployment, but I'm open to listening to team members talk about what they would like to do with that as well. I see I've only got about 5 minutes left, less than that. We've got Wrike is another app that can go into a Microsoft team site or the underlying SharePoint team site. And if we dig under the hood a little bit, we see that Wrike just appears to be yet another form, another flavor of next-gen Microsoft Planner. It's all about laying out tiles, laying out groups. It's all about the tasking. It's all about the tracking. People are getting that those last 2 stages of collaboration maturity, the technology's in a place where now we can start stepping up into those areas and maturing collaboration inside an organization. Downside for this one is it seems like it's another subscription-based service. So we'll have to dig in a little bit further to see what the play is, whether or not the juice is worth the squeeze of compared to getting Microsoft Planner for free. Stay tuned on that. Lastly, for today, we've got something called Hootsuite. I don't think I'd ever heard of them, and when I dug in, I started finding out that Hootsuite is actually potentially a very useful tool for being able to publish once and then track that publication out to multiple social media channels. That's what their claim to fame is that you manage all your social media in one place. And are there other competitors out there? Yes, there absolutely is. Even MTech uses other competitors, but this one dovetails seamlessly right into Microsoft Teams. So if your organization is planning or already adopting Microsoft Teams as its de facto communication stroke collaboration platform, and you know that you need to be managing all of your social media posts and you need the convenience of somehow creating this nexus, then this may in fact be the tool for you. So it's something to dig into. Lastly, we get about 3 more minutes. I'd like to see the gates open up on the chat or even the microphones open up. What do we want to cover in 2018? What do we want to see in February? What do you guys want to see in March? What hurts? What are you struggling with? Give me some feedback, everybody, and let's see what's going on with chat. Elizabeth, do we want to dare to unmute microphones and let people talk?
Sure, I'm happy to. And if you guys have any issues with chatting, feel free to just click on the raised hand icon on the navigation panel, and be sure for those if you can enter your audio pin so you'll have access. Everybody is now unmuted.
Okay. Everybody, we've only got 3 minutes. We have an absolute hard stop at 1 o'clock. So if you've got some things you want to see, now is the time to just throw it up there. Aaron, Anthony, Blake, Brian, Craig, Dan, Jolien, I know you want to. Go ahead. Aaron, it sounds like you're trying to say something. Nope. Anthony, what about you? You sound like you're brand new. What would you like to see us cover next month? I'll shift over to Jolien. I know you want to cover more stuff in Microsoft Teams. Fahad, what about you? Welcome. Go ahead, Jolien. For Aaron. Aaron, we're hearing some microphone activity, but we're not actually hearing your voice. Teresa, what about you? I
muted him for you. Sorry about that, Mark.
Teresa, what's going on in your company that you'd like to see us cover? Any topics, past or present or future? Okay, we're at 12:58. I'd love you all to think about this going forward. Let me make sure I'm hearing.
Am I unmuted?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, hey, it's Craig at AT&T. For me, the hard part is we don't have O365, so I can't, and we're stuck on SharePoint 2013 on-premise, so I don't have SharePoint framework, I don't have PowerApps, I don't have Flow, I don't have Teams, I don't have Yammer, I don't have any of that, and all the user groups and conferences and blogs and everything is just leaving us in the dust. So please just don't forsake the people that are stuck on older platforms.
You got it, Craig. What about today? We're talking a little bit about SharePoint Designer, and next month on InfoPath. Is that useful to you, or are there other tools you're using?
Oh, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, we'd be happy to. In fact, I love it when people email me and say, here's a member challenge. See if you can help us solve this problem, Mark, at the next session. And I'll bring it up. I don't have to name who you are. I'll just say a member brought this idea up, and this is what we want to cover. So feel free to email me, you guys. My address is up on the meetup. We're at the 1 minute left mark, so I know we need to close. The next meeting is February 14th, Valentine's Day. Meeting after that is March 11th. Fantastic session. Great start to 2018. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Ralph. Craig, thanks for the chatting. Thanks for the verbal, and welcome to some of the new members. We look forward to seeing you on February 14th. There. Talk to you guys all later. Bye.
Thanks, Bob.